My first guest in the program this afternoon is Labor Senator Deb O'Neil here in the studio with me. Thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure to be with you, Tom.
I'm sure you've had a look at my EFO, the first surplus in many years. We're on the cusp of that. Glad that some debt will begin to be paid down.
Well, yes, but there is a big gap between what the government was promising and what they've actually been able to deliver. And I think that the country's starting to become very aware that, you've really got to be careful about what this government says they're going to do and what actually gets to happen. Talk about money in the pipeline, even in their own document that they've released, they talk about, a supposed investment of $100 billion, but if you have a look at it, it's only $4.2 billion over the next 4 years. Now, that's a lot of money for a household, but for a country, $4.2 billion in terms of infrastructure goes right to the heart of, what this government is doing wrong, and that's not investing. And the flow-on effects are actually being seen. There was a great article this morning I noticed in the Fin Review by Sarah Turner, and in that, you have to go to alternative sources from the government to actually get the truth about what's going on in the economy, like the Reserve Bank Governor, Philip Lowe, businesses, business leaders, researchers are saying, well, they predicted that there was going to be a drop in growth to 2.25. They were correct.
So if we look at what's happened today in my EFO, though, obviously we've had this drop-off in receipts, which is forecasting.
Well, that's a sign of slow growth.
Right,
they're supposed to be looking after the economy.
The government's dealing with this, so they had a drop-off in receipts, a drop-off in payments as well, and the net impact was $13.2 billion, which they've effectively absorbed. Is that the right decision? Because Labor's saying the economy's soft. That seems like a good call to make, rather than finding spending cuts to preserve the $45 billion surplus?
Well, I think that they just simply don't seem to understand the economy. They talk a big game as if their economy is going to be all wonderful. The minute they walk through the door, the economy is in good shape. The reality is that we've got everything on the downward slide. So economic growth is down today, wages growth is clearly down today, and I saw you just presenting, the detail about that growth, that failure of growth, in fact. Consumption growth's down, business investment is down, and that, people who are going to put money into the economy, they are pretty careful about what they do. They have no confidence in this government, or they would be doing
business investment then.
Well, they're not the government. We are not the government. We would definitely be investing in infrastructure in a way that this government seems incapable of understanding. And we wouldn't have
just put extra money in infrastructure. And one of the issues already in Melbourne, the project there is you've got a shortage of people and resources, so there's only so much infrastructure you can do. But
well, there's a failure of training there, and that's what's happening. This is 7 years into the Liberal government and Liberal National Party government, and a failure to invest in the things that matter to grow the country's productivity. It's starting to come home. The chickens are coming home to roost.
What about wages then? Because Labor talks about this a lot. We know there'd be a penalty rates decision. Would there be anything else Labor would do on wages specifically?
Well, when we get into government, we'll have plenty of policies for then. We are not the government.
Well, you've got to have policies before you get into government.
Well, we did have policies before we attempted to get into government, and we're not at that part of the cycle yet, Tom.
But when Labor talks about wages a lot, just curious as to what you do. I mean, what did you take to the last election that would have helped wages specifically?
Look, I think there's so many things we could talk about, but in terms of infrastructure, this government keeps talking about money in the pipeline. But the problem is there is no pipeline construction underway. There's a big gap in the rhetoric and the delivery, and it's their failure to invest in infrastructure for the country is actually being felt in the business sector.
Wages have been a huge thing for Labor.
Yes.
Been talking about this a lot. So what did you take to the last election that would have helped the wages situation?
Look, I don't know that we need to be accountable for what happened prior to the last election.
You're saying, the government's been asleep at the wheel on wages, and they had a plan of the election and you took your plan. What did you take that would have helped wages?
Infrastructure investment is a critical thing. Wages grow when the economy is growing. The economy is not growing. So the government's promise to, be all things to every person around business and wages is now being found, they're being found wanting in a big way.
Were you going to outspend the government on infrastructure?
Well, look, Labor's always invested in infrastructure, and, when you see it...
That's different to outspending the government.
Well, we are not the government.
No, I know, but we're talking about where the economy is now,
yep.
And it happens to only be a few months after the election results, so we can go, right, here we are now with the government's plan, where would we have been with Labor's? Were you going to outspend the government significantly on infrastructure?
We had a commitment to infrastructure, and we had that when we were in government the last time. I live on the Central Coast. There'll be a lot of people who are heading, hopefully safely, through the fire zone that is Australia this summer. up the Central Coast, there was a very significant commitment to building a tunnel underneath the road there by Labor. I was just happy when the big budget cuts came in under Tony Abbott that project actually didn't get defunded.
You're not able to say, well, we were going to get this project and this done, and the government won't, and that's how the economy would have been better, for example.
Well, no, I don't. I think that's sort of a hypothetical, really. The fact is, Labor understands.
Isn't every election a hypothetical?
Well, no, not when you end up with a government that we've got. That's a reality that we confront every day. I wish it was hypothetical, but we've got a Liberal National Party government, and they're not doing very well in the economy states.
I want to talk to you about auditing as well. I know that you're keeping a close eye as part of this inquiry. Just broadly, as sort of a health check.
Yeah.
Are you confident of the veracity of our auditing for the most part? I mean, there are not ticking time bombs out there where things have not been done properly, because it's sort of the boring but important part of the financial system.
Great question. And no, I am not confident, and I am very concerned, and that's why we're actually having this inquiry. And I'm not the only one. ASIC have been concerned about this for 7 years, and they put out their most recent report. But I thought I'd bring along what it looked like at this time last year when ASIC put out their report, which is sort of these statements that were just completely blacked out records of what was going on in the different audit companies. Today, we have a very different situation now where people can actually see what's going on within the audit companies. I've got too many papers here to show you, but it was blacked out documents. Now we have a situation where...
So there's more transparency.
There is a degree of transparency, and, you know, there's resistance from the Big Four originally for that to happen, but we've hit a point now where they're actually starting to say they accept that they've got to do that.